Okay, students need to be aware the difference between structural and behavioral adaptations, because in a typical PSLE questions, a scenario will be given of a certain organism, and students are required to distinguish between what is a structural adaptation and what is a behavioral adaptations. So the key thing to look out for, as long as there's a part of this organism that helps it to adapt. For example, the tortoise shell, right? It's hard, right? So it's a structural adaptation of the tortoise that help it to survive. And for example, during winter, you can see many birds, they are migrating from colder areas. For example, in the northern hemisphere, they fly thousands of kilometers to the south. This is a behavior because they are flying, right? It's not part of the body. So this is called behavioral adaptations. So we need to distinguish between structural and behavioral adaptations, which will continue in the lesson as we progress. Okay, here are some more examples of structural adaptations. For example, tortoise having a hard shell, armadillo having a hard body armor. These are structural adaptations. And likewise, for some animals with a certain body patterns on itself, like I mentioned, the non-poisonous butterfly mimics the poisonous, so it's also considered structural adaptation. The reason because of their colorings or markings on their body. Okay, next, camouflage is also by imitating the colors or patterns. Okay, so these are examples, and this one I'll move ahead. You can read up yourself. Okay, powerful rear legs, because this is part of the body structure, right? So this is also structural adaptation. Okay, and okay, some lizards, they have these membranes on either side of the body, because as they jump off from a greater height, right? Once they open, they can glide across the trees. Some can travel as far as 30 meters across. Okay, so these are all structural adaptations. Web feet also of frogs. Okay, these are structural adaptations. And okay, next, streamline body. Okay, this one you take note, because this one commonly tested in exam, so you highlight this part. Animals having streamline body, how do you explain? You should explain by, because of their streamline body shape, right? It helps the animals to move through water as friction between the animal's body and water is reduced. Okay, sometimes it not necessarily move through water, it can also move through mud, which we'll see one example later called the lungfish. Okay, lungfish has a streamlined body, and it can burrow through the soft mud easily, much easily, because of its streamlined body. Okay, so you take note of these. These are structural adaptations. And also for the birds, water birds, they have waterproof feathers that keeps the birds dry. And blubber is a thick layer of fats stored under the skin of some mammals, like the whales, to keep the body warm, especially under the very cold ocean. Okay, this nostril near the top of an animal's head, this can refer to the dugong, the whale, because they need not completely surface, only partially surface. They can take in the air from the water level above. So these are structural adaptations. Okay, you can look through this. Okay, this is a table showing the different structures of animals. So you take note of this. Do you know what's a manatee? A manatee is also a sea mammal. It's a sea cow. Looks like the dugong. Okay, the manatee. So it has flippers. It also has streamlined body, although it's not very streamlined, but actually it's because it's quite big in size. Yeah, streamlined. Okay, one thing I want you to take note is this part. You take your later after you extract the file. Okay, you notice these animals here, right? Air bubbles. Okay, these animals, they can totally submerge underwater and breathe through the air bubbles. Just like the diver, right? They carry the oxygen tank in the deep sea diving. They do not need to surface up to breathe. They are carrying the oxygen tank. So the water spider, water beetle, great diving beetle, and this beetle, they are able to behave in a certain way to make this bubble carry along the bubble with them underwater. So this pattern, right, you take note, this one will be under behavioral adaptation because they behave this way, or BA, this one. Whereas this, on this side, is structural because these animals on here, the water stick insect, water scorpion, the wiggler, which refers to the mosquito, and these animals here, they use like a straw, just like a snorkeler, right? Okay, because this is part of the body. This air tube is growing out from its body to help it to receive or take in the air above the water surface. So these are structural adaptations. Whereas these are behavioral because they carry the bubble with them. It's not part of the body. They make the bubble. So usually they test you for this. What's the difference in the adaptation between the water spider and the water scorpion? Okay, these two are the water spider. Water spider makes air bubble. Water scorpion depends on this air tubes behind its body. So we do a YouTube to share with you the difference of this.
The aptly named diving bell spider. It spends its life underwater, yet, like all its terrestrial cousins, it still has to breathe air. That's why it spins a fine woven net to trap a bubble that becomes the spider's oxygen supply and its home. To replenish the air, the spider takes a trip topside and collects another bubble by trapping it in the fine hairs on its posterior. It can spend its entire life underwater, where it becomes the terror of tadpoles, small fish, and invertebrates. The diving bell spider feeds by pouring digestive juices on its prey. If it did this in the water, the juices would become so diluted they'd be useless. But in the diving bell, the spider is surrounded by air, so it can feed just like it would on land.
Okay, so you can see here, right? The diving bell spider, or sometimes called water spider for short, it actually climbs up to make this bubble. So this bubble is not part of its body, but is able to behave in a manner they can make this bubble, bring it underwater for it to breathe. So this is called a behavioral adaptations. So now I show you the other one, the water scorpion. Okay, let's see the water scorpion, which has an air tube for it to breathe above water here, because it's penetrating its air tube slightly above the water for it to receive the oxygen. So this will be a structural adaptation.
The water scorpion. Unrelated to scorpions, they're actually a type of insect belonging to the bug family. Equipped with eyes especially adapted for underwater vision, and large grappling forearms.
Okay, you will notice this part, right? This is the air tube. It actually is quite long. Some can be as long as like 15 to 20 centimeters. It is actually touching the surface on top to receive air.
But this proboscis is its real weapon. Loaded with a powerful neurotoxin, strong enough to kill fish and small amphibians.
Okay, this is a tadpole being enlarged.
Powerful digestive juices are also injected, quickly liquefying the insides of its victim, enabling the water scorpion to suck up the remaining soup.
Okay, so you have seen the difference between the behavior and structural adaptations of these two animals. So I hope that you can classify accordingly what is structural, what is behavioral adaptations. So as I go back to the worksheet here, you can see. So those that carry air bubbles, right, they are behavioral. Those that as part of the body, okay, all these animals, they have this air tube, usually at the back end of the animal, near the backside area. Okay, so they have a tube that penetrates above the surface to receive air. So these are structural adaptations. Okay, we'll move on to the next part.